Maybe you have observed that when the politicians are talking about securing peace and stability in the world, they are talking very often about bringing liberty and democracy into the world, and why they are not talking only about liberty or democracy. Because liberty, the liberal doctrine, liberal ideology, is something totally different than democratism. The system, the electoral and the political system of democracy. Because we can perceive many liberal monarchs, well, maybe not many, but several striking examples of liberal monarchs, like Joseph II, the emperor of the Austrian, the Habsburg Empire in the late 18th century, for instance. He was very much for the case of tolerance. He was very much for freedom of the press and so on. So he was pretty liberal. And we have also these not liberal democracies, for instance, and I'm not talking here about these facade democracies like all those countries dominated by the Soviet Union several decades ago. I am now thinking more about the Arab Spring, for instance, when we were observing how the Islamists won the elections, and it was a real relief for the West, because they were not liberal, yes, but they were also democratic, and the army, not the other way around. Of course, the elections was something very disturbing, because the Islamists have won, and then the army brought to some extent the situation, the pre-electoral situation. So, and then the West, it was a great relief for the West, but nobody could speak loudly about this relief, really, because it was not democratic. I mean, this action of the army. The army is pretty much much more secular oriented, much more rationalistic, and so on. But this action wasn't democratic. It was an act against democracy. So I think that it's the high time for the West to say it clearly. Liberalism is far more important than democracy. Democracy is only a system. Liberalism is a set of virtues. It's an ideology, it's a doctrine, and a way of life, the Western way of life. But it's possible for every man in the world to aspire to that way of life. It's not reserved, as the postmodernists, contrary to the postmodernists, it's not reserved to the Western culture, as we can see in Hong Kong, in Japan, with the Furita phenomenon and so on.